Welcome to Healing at the Edge, a podcast featuring interviews, archive talks, and teachings on conscious living, conscious dying with RamDev Dale Borglum, brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. Dale has been a meditation teacher for nearly 50 years and has been at the bedside of the dying and their loved ones for over 40 years. He was the director of the Hanuman Foundation and founded the first Center for Conscious Dying in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's taught with Stephen Levine, Ram Dass, and countless others on the spiritual path. Dale is still working with the dying today. For more information, please visit livingdying.org.
So today I would like to talk about service as a path to awakening. And in fact, this workshop in Taos that I've been mentioning, we're going to be talking about both service and devotion. So I've been thinking a lot about service. I'd like to tell you about my favorite part of the Bhagavad Gita. It's chapter 12, the chapter on devotion, verses 8 through 12. Verse 8 says, "Set your heart on me alone and give to me your understanding. You shall in truth live in me hereafter." So that's Krishna talking to Arjuna. He's saying, set your heart on me alone and give me your mind, and then you will be living within me forever. But he goes on to say in verses 9, 10, and 11, he says, if you can't do that, then meditate on me, practice. It's difficult to just be with God every moment. So if you can't do that, practice. He says, if you can't even do that, do your works for my sake alone. Consecrate all your actions to me, and you shall attain perfection. And he says then, if you can't even do that, take refuge in me, do your actions for yourself, but offer the fruits of your actions to me with the selfless devotion of a humble servant. And then in verse 12, he says, higher than meditation is surrender in love of the fruits of one's actions, for peace follows surrender. This is the easiest path. From this peace will follow practice, and from practice all will follow. So what Krishna is saying here is, yeah, it's great if you can just rest in me, if you can just completely surrender into God. And if you can't do that, then practice. Eventually you'll get there. But he's saying that the easiest path is the path of service, the path of doing what you're doing, whether you're a nurse or a mother or just a human being. Do it as service. Do it as ideally offering everything to me as you're doing it. But if you can't even remember me, do it for yourself. Do it as best as you can do it. And then later on, you can offer all the fruits of your actions to God, not holding on to the fruits. Maharaji would say things like, serve the poor. Everyone is poor before Christ. If you serve the poor and remember God, you will become one with Christ. He said, serving people is service to God. And many of you, I'm sure, know and remember that Maharaji had a very, very close relationship with Hanuman. Either he was a great devotee of Hanuman, or many people believe that he was actually an incarnation of Hanuman. We don't really have to get into the nuances of that, but one way or the other, he was some kind of representation of Hanuman, at least in my heart and in my mind. And Hanuman, of course, is the aspect of the deity that expresses devotion through selfless service. Krishna is the aspect of God as lover and beloved. Ram is the perfect guy. He's the perfect husband, the perfect king, the perfect father, perfect brother. But Hanuman is the perfect servant of God. He achieves freedom by serving Ram in whatever it is that he's doing. And interestingly enough, Hanuman is an incarnation of Shiva, which is the god of fire, the god of transformation, the god of destruction. He took on the form of a monkey for the Ramayana, the drama of the Ramayana. And this quality of transformation, of purification, happens when we're serving. So, true service arises from a deep connection with other people. And at a deeper level, all work can be a path to God. Let the action happen through you. You're not the actor. God is the actor. Spontaneity, yet surrender. Control, yet let go. So, motivations for service. One of the biggest motivations for service is we feel guilty. When you were little, when I was little, we were told you should be a good boy, you should be a good girl, be nice to people, take care of people, don't hit your brother, take care of your brother, right? Those kinds of things. So that this superego thing of I should be a better person, and I have all this conditioning of being nice. Is really for many people why they're serving. Another motivation for service is wanting to stay busy so you don't feel your pain, distraction from pain. But there are obviously more healthy motivations for service. Feeling connected to other people, right? Compassion literally means suffering with another, being connected to the suffering. Another motivation for service is wanting to awaken, right? We're using service as a way of seeing our attachments, seeing them clearly. Because when we're working with another person, trying to help, all of the guilt, all of the shame, all of the need, all of the superego stuff is going to be coming up, wanting to stay busy, those kinds of things. Another form of service is realizing, as Maharaji kept saying, every form is God. So, of course, you're going to serve if that person in front of you is an aspect of the divinity. Mother Teresa famously said, she said, when I pick up a leper out of the gutter in Calcutta, which it was called in those days, I see Christ in his distressing disguise. So she on one level, she's helping a leper. At the other level, she's helping Christ in his distressing disguise. And finally, our true nature is compassion. In the totally awakened mind, one of the qualities of the totally awakened mind is naturally arising compassionate activity. When we're out of the way and when we're feeling the suffering that's going on in the world, we will be expressing compassion because it is their true nature, compassion with a capital C. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, the Tao never does anything, yet through it all things are done. If powerful men and women could center themselves in it, the whole world would be transformed by itself, in its natural rhythms. People would be content with their simple everyday lives, in harmony and free of grasping. When there is no grasping, all things are at peace. So, in a very non-theistic way, he's saying the same thing as Maharaji here. Lao Tzu is saying, the Tao never does anything, yet through it all things are done. Maharaji would say, I don't do anything, God does everything. Same way of talking about it. And here's a quote that really goes to the heart of the matter. Hanuman said, when I don't know who I am, I love Ram and I serve Ram. When I remember who I am Ram. Okay. So, letting that one sink in for a moment. And whenever I'm giving these talks, there's kind of two ways of going about it. One way is talking about service. Here are the points. Here's Here's the stuff you can put in your notebook. Here's the way to think about service in a more useful, hopefully useful way. But another way of talking about this is remembering who we are, remembering who God is, remembering who the Guru is. And I've been thinking a lot about Maharaji lately, feeling him in a way that's just been so sweet. And remembering how much compassion he had, that everything he would do, every action was in the service of protecting, awakening, supporting the people around him. And that's just not me because I happen to be in India. That is the nature of the universe, that it's a benevolent universe. It doesn't look like that in a lot of ways. We look at the news and it sure seems like there's not a lot of non-benevolence going on. But without getting too much into Vedanta philosophy here, underneath all of the suffering, underneath all of the difficulty that we see around us, there is wholeness. There is this oneness. Suffering is grace. The suffering is showing us the way home. So going back to that quote of Mother Teresa's where she talks about seeing Christ in his distressing disguise, there's this Maharaji story that I really love. And one of his devotees came to him, a wealthy fellow, who said, my daughter's getting married, and I really want you to come to the wedding. It's going to be in so many days at my house. It's going to be a really big deal. I really want you to come. And Maharaji says, I'll definitely be there. I'll be there. So the wedding happens, and Maharaji doesn't seem to show up. And the next time the man, the devotee, saw Maharaji, he said, you promised you were going to come to my house for the wedding. You didn't come. And Maharaji said, do you remember when the wedding was starting, a beggar in very tattered clothing came to your door and said, can I come into the wedding? And you said, no. That was me. That was me in disguise, right? So every time I see a homeless person with their hand out, every time, hopefully, I see anybody, I try to remember that it's Maharaji in his disguise. I mean, how do you know when it's God in disguise and it's not God in disguise? Is it ever not God in disguise? So service takes on a different tone, a different feeling quality in our beings. If instead of doing it out of guilt or I need to stay busy or I'm trying to help people, it's an act of love. It's your relationship with the beloved, that the homeless person, your partner, even yourself is a manifestation of that which is love. And then service is transformed. It's an act of joy. It's not a responsibility. It's not a duty. Compassion is going beyond wanting to be happy and willing to be present and real. Compassion has a lot to do with boundaries. And a lot of our suffering comes because we have inappropriate boundaries. We let energy come in that we're not able to deal with. We're not able to open up in the other direction and include people that we'd like to be open to, that we're still trying to protect ourselves. Hanuman has two qualities that come together of an incredible tenderness and all the fierce power of the universe put together at the same time. One time, I had the great grace to actually meet Hanuman, just him and me in my bedroom. And that was the thing I felt. There was such tender, sweet love, and yet all the power in the universe. Can we approach service knowing that we are that it's not just doing good, it's not just helping people, it's really expressing this Hanuman-like quality that is the essence of all of us. what gets in the way a lot of the times for many of us in doing this is our lack of self-compassion. Traditionally, in the East, when they talk about compassion, they talk about service, it's always compassion for the other person, because since you are the practitioner, you're the meditator, you're the devotee, of course, you love yourself. When the Dalai Lama came to America, he was astounded to find out that people didn't have self-esteem. He would come up to people and say, do you feel that? Do you feel that? Do you have lack of self-esteem? Because in the East, that was not a thing, at least back in those days. And if we're trying to serve and we don't have compassion for ourselves, I don't think we have to talk too much longer about how messy that can end up being. So that compassion is not an emotion. It literally means, as I said before, to suffer together. And this requires us to be centered, to be present, to be so solidly embedded in the hara, the sense of fullness, the sense of ego integration, and that the power of the universe is flowing through me, that yes, I can open my heart, I can be vulnerable, and I can feel the suffering that's around me, and then I can respond to it in a very natural way. Many times before, we've talked about the qualities of compassion, the qualities of the compassionate heart that lead to service that's not ego-driven. And certainly, they are a warm heart, a spacious heart, and a connected heart. And I really like picking one of those and going through my day and trying to feel, is my heart connected? Am I feeling connected to who I'm having lunch with, who I'm talking to on Zoom, who I'm getting mad at when I'm driving in traffic? Can I keep coming back to that sense of connection? Or on the other hand, a spacious heart, where I'm not getting caught in grasping. It's not my need. It's trusting. It's going into that deeper, spacious quality of the heart. And the Dalai Lama very interestingly talked about this other quality of compassion, that it's at the heart of selfless service. And that's the ability to equalize and switch yourself with another person. You may remember that the near enemy of compassion is pity. If I'm helping you because I think you need help and I'm the helper, I'm identified with being a helper. RamDev called it helper prison, where I'm the helper and you're the helpee, and I'm here to help you and I'm here to fix you. You're the dying person and I'm the guy from the Living Dying Project, for instance. To that extent, compassion isn't happening. To that extent, you're not awakening as the practice of service is unfolding. Compassion is the healing agent that makes it possible to bear the hurt so that the truth can dissolve suffering. Mindfulness allows us to feel the hurt, to feel the pain of being in a body and a personality. And compassion creates the space and the connectedness to allow the pain to dissolve. One of my favorite quotes, Walt Whitman says, "Sometimes touching another human being is almost more than I can bear." Imagine helping with that sense of connectedness. The preciousness of being with another person, being grateful to everybody, no matter how difficult they might be. Love your enemy, if you will. You take it all in. You take in the pain of the world. You let it touch your heart, and you transmute it into compassion. Okay. How we deal with our own suffering largely determines how we are able to serve others. Our lack of compassion for ourselves limits our natural, deeper tendency to help others. As a society, we tend to push away any contact with old age, sickness, and death. Those qualities are culturally pushed away. In the pushing away, we make suffering conceptual rather than real and immediate. I mean, in a way, dealing with that very issue is the point of the Living Dying Project. We're all going to die. And can we be with dying? Can we be with dying people? Can we be with the concept of dying? The concept of old age? And people who are old, like me, and do that from the heart rather than from the mind. Understanding service from the mind is interesting, it's useful, but true service is service that's coming from the heart. Staying busy, feeling pity, conceptualizing, denying, superficial warmth are all strategies for not really meeting suffering directly. Can we have self-compassion for these patterns in ourselves? They will be revealed as we are working with service. We don't need to force others to confront those places in themselves, but just by doing that ourselves, becoming somebody who is more and more free of those obstacles, then we're that living model that other people can pay attention to or not. We've been trained to push away feelings of helplessness. In the West, we should be independent. We should be strong. We complain when we're faced with helplessness. And what does it feel like to be helpless? RamDev talked a lot about those 22 years of his life after he had his stroke, where he was always, up until then, he was the helper. He was the strong guy in the room. And then all of a sudden, he couldn't put his own clothes on. He couldn't feed himself. He had to be helped. Can we begin to learn to accept help as well as being a helper, moment to moment? In fact, for a lot of us, accepting help is probably more difficult than helping us. Admitting the fact that we still have places in our personality structures where we aren't helpful. Where places where we're unable to accept help. Here's a mantra from Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, if the person you love is suffering, you can say this mantra: dear one, I know that you are suffering. That's why I am here for you. You can say this out loud. You can say this silently. You're here. You recognize the fact your loved one is suffering. You don't need to make a big deal about it. You just generate your own presence and you say this mantra. That's all. Dear one, I know that you are suffering. That's why I'm here for you. To let people you know that they're suffering. This is the essence of love, to be there for the one you love when she is suffering. But very often, the desire for pleasant feelings subverts compassion into sorrow. We get lost in pity. Emptiness has to do with a mind that is spacious, not fixed. And this egolessness then allows us to open to compassion beyond concept. The Tibetans have this incredibly beautiful notion that compassion is a mixture of sadness and joy. We're touching the suffering of other people. We're being touched by it. We're being touched by our own suffering. But there is also a joy that the heart is open. somebody asked Nisargadatta Maharaj, this teacher of non-duality, how do you stay so equanimous all the time? How come you don't seem to be bothered by anything? And he said, I don't care what happens. He's so rooted in oneness that no matter the unfolding, no matter the quality of it, no matter the details of it, he's resting in that joy that transcends happiness and sadness, illness and wellness, even life and death. So many stories about great saints who, as death was approaching, they were unaffected by that. They knew they were dying. They knew they were going to die. They were joyful. So that at an ultimate level, who is helping? Is there really a helper? Is there a helpee? Can we use helping? Can we use selfless service as a way of really coming to this place of true selflessness? Can we use service as a way of uncovering these delusions where we feel that we are not one with everything? In the beginning, I said one of the motivations for service is feeling connected to other people. And that is certainly true. But the deepest motivation is not that we're connected to people, but we're all one, that there's not somebody out there to be helped, that it's yourself. It's one universe. It's one song. There's one of us in all these different forms, that your suffering is my suffering, that your joy is my joy. And then suffering and compassion and service take on a very different meaning. It becomes much more intimate. It's not something that has any sense of ego involved. It's not like I'm trying to help anybody. It's not, there's even an I doing anything. It's very restful. It's very fulfilling. So then finally, can we build a compassionate community, a community of service, creating communities that support and nurture service, the importance of collective action. And certainly the Living Dying Project is my and our attempt to do that, that I really, really try to remember that I need to do my best, but it's Hanuman's Living Dying Project. I just work here. And I mean, here he is, he's right on my desk. And when I'm talking to people, I'm trying to remember that I'm the servant and let the I dissolve into that. And in a way, that's why being with dying for many people is such a strong practice. Who is it that dies? And beyond that, if somebody's dying, it's very difficult not to be there completely for them. If you meet your friend and they're healthy and you're pretty sure you're going to be meeting them in next week or in 2 weeks, it's easier not to get fully surrendered into serving that human being. But if you don't know that that person might be alive in a day, to me, it calls out the best in me. And do we really know? I mean, it's very easy to say that we don't know that we're all going to be here at the end of this talk. We don't. We don't know that. Is it possible that all this talk about service we're bringing into the moment right now? I mean, I'm the mouth, you're the ears. That's going to change as we start having a conversation. But is it possible then that we're serving each other by being fully with each other, not multitasking, not judging, not trying to figure it out, but how fully can we support? How fully can we connect? How fully can we be with each other? So that service then can be learned moment to moment. Serving yourself, serving the people out there, self-compassion, compassion for all. I really love Tonglen practice, where I just do a breath or two of taking and sending Tonglen. If you don't know what that is, it's described on our website under meditations and practices, of just being willing to take in the suffering of all those people out there that I see are suffering and send out blessings, send them out, send out the antidote to suffering with loving kindness, breathing in the suffering of the universe, breathing out the antidote to the suffering. And the more I do that, the emptier I become, the happier I become. The Dalai Lama says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Everybody wants to be happy. Can we just be compassionate? Okay. Let's open this up to discussion.
Carol posted a question in the chat. Carol, I don't know if you want me to just read the question or if you'd like to ask it yourself. I'll read it. So Carol.
Yeah, you can read it.
Oh, right. I am thinking based on my life experience that service was enabled in relationship to other. Without plan, my life was graced with many opportunities to do service, which was enormously gratifying and enlightening. But as age, illness, and isolation increased, and there is a disconnect from others, how does one provide service? Yes, the problem of connection or lack of.
Okay. The problem of connection or lack of. So certainly there's a level of connection where you're in a room with somebody, you're touching them, you're saying things to them. In Chinese medicine, there are, I think, 3 levels of healing, maybe 4. Let this come out as I talk about it. The grossest level is healing where you invade somebody's body. You put a needle in them, you put a scalpel in them, you actually go inside somebody's body. The second level of healing is you touch somebody, you massage them, you do acupressure instead of acupuncture. You're touching them, you're not going inside the skin. The third level of healing is you talk to them. You're like a therapist. You're talking to somebody, here's some good advice. The highest level of healing is your being itself, without you being there, without you saying anything or doing anything. Your being is healing. So Maharaji, he was not a surgeon, so he didn't go inside of people's bodies, but certainly those other 3 levels, and certainly the last level of just who he was. So, Carol, you can be at home, and at one level, you're not connected because there's nobody in your house. At another level, you are connected. Fundamentally, you are connected to people. And I have so many times been doing Tonglen for somebody or sending loving thoughts to somebody. And I get feedback that something happened, something moved, something transformed. So that a lot of times that I'm lying in bed at night, I just do a compassion breath for all the people I know who are suffering. I say my mantra, then I think of John. Then I say my mantra and I think of Natalie. Then I say my mantra and I think of all these different people, my son, his mother, people in my groups, clients that I have. And I get happier, I get joyful, but I really have an incredibly deep belief that this is doing something in the world. Just as an example, it's kind of a corny example, but where I live here, there are wild turkeys that have been coming around and waking me up long before I want to wake up. They're very noisy, and they seem to like to congregate right outside my bedroom window. And they generally, at about 5 or 5:30, start making this racket as the sun is coming up for about half an hour, and they just wake me up. So today I wanted to sleep so that I could be at my best for this talk, right? And the turkeys came, and they started making their racket. And my first thought was, oh, the turkeys. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to send the turkeys a message to lovingly go away and make the noise somewhere else. And I just started meditating love for the turkeys. And within a minute, they left and I went back to sleep, right? So your mind is a lot more powerful than you think it is. That the highest level of healing really is Dzogchen, of being in non-duality, right? There's so many stories about saints who healed people from a distance. I had an osteopath who could heal me over the telephone, right? He could put my spine back in place. So I would just trust the fact that you are connected to all beings, whether you're physically connected or not. And it really saves on the gas bill and the wear and tear on your automobile, right? You could be healing people all by yourself. Do you have any response to that, dear Carol?
Well, it's very helpful what you're saying. I think this is, I'm in a place where I can't explain to myself what's happening. My lifestyle has changed dramatically, and I'm sure that's a factor. But I also feel that in the silent and the silent spaces in my life, a lot of junk and garbage is coming up in my mind. And right. I ask myself, am I sad because I'm facing moving forward, and while I'm gratified and amazed at my life, I'm missing the path and the capacity to do as I used to do. But I hadn't really, what your feedback is very helpful, because I hadn't actually thought about using my mind to just send positive energy, vibration, however we want to label it, to others. I tend to be very empathic, and I get stuck sometimes in picking up on other people's negativity and identifying with it and making it my own. And so I need to work on moving out of that space and, being clear about, what my mind is doing. But it's just startling to me. And you said something earlier in the talk about busyness. And in the course of my life, I've always done service, and it's just happened that way. But I think a lot of the garbage that's coming up, the junk that's coming up in my mind and memories, are things that I bypassed. I think there's an expression, spiritual bypass, where I bypassed a lot of painful stuff that was going on. And so my day to day is, I wish I could get out there and do more service and not be inundated with this stuff that comes up. So that's, I don't know if any of this makes sense, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. And sense is good. I think there's wisdom beyond sense, nonsense. And as your life gets a little quieter because you're older and you're not as connected, moving around as much. I mean, it's kind of like meditation. As you get a little quieter, it seems that the mind is getting busier. That busyness was always underneath there. All that distraction is part of the healing process. And I got some slight sense that you were judging yourself for having all these distracted thoughts. How much can you have compassion for that part of yourself, the part of you that keeps throwing these thoughts up? And even beyond that those thoughts are equally sacred to a quiet mind, right? At some level, for us to think that this is God and this is not God is delusion. Certainly, cultivating some concentration, some quietness of mind is very useful in the beginning, but to finally get to the point where nothing is a distraction, that it's all that unfolding, is something that I think you, Carol, are very capable of.
I have thought the word judgment. I don't experience myself as judgmental, but it's probably true what I am. I think what I struggle with when thoughts, memories, vibrations come up is being able to be okay with the feeling, the experience of the feeling. And so looking back at my life, I imagine that I had very good defenses, rationalizing, moving out, compartmentalizing to get away from the feeling that's coming up. But as my life is changing, there's nowhere to run, and the feelings are there, and I can feel them in different parts of my body. And so as I'm talking and brainstorming with you, I'm thinking, oh my word, and then this sounds kind of judgmental. I've kind of become very preoccupied with myself in this space that I have.
Okay. Once again, compassion means literally suffering with. So when you're all alone, can you have compassion for yourself? Can you be with an open heart as nakedly and intimately as you can, those places where you feel disconnected? Let me read this my favorite quote about compassion. It's from Pema Chodron. I think I've got it here somewhere. Compassion is more emotionally challenging than loving kindness because it involves the willingness to feel pain. It definitely requires the training of a warrior. When we practice generating compassion, we can expect to experience our fear of pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move gently toward what scares us. The trick to doing this is to stay with emotional distress without tightening into aversion, to let fear soften us rather than harden into resistance.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's right on.
And learning to do that with yourself, for yourself, will enable you then to feel compassion for others when they're not even there, right? That your heart will be open enough that you can read about what's going on in the Middle East or the Ukraine or college campuses or around the neighborhood, and still feel compassion, right? But it really involves, in my experience, compassion is learned in that very simple moment where you notice that you've just been distracted. You've been thinking about the past. You've been meditating, and all of a sudden you realize that for the past 2 minutes you've been thinking about something or another. And in that moment where you notice that, what happens? Can you come back to being present with compassion? Can you come back to being present with warmth, with kindness toward yourself, with mercy? Or is there some very slight judgment, some pulling, some kind of hook, some kind of slight violence with yourself to come back to being present? Or can you use the noticing of lostness as the inspiration for opening the heart just a little bit more? So that's where you learn compassion, not when the doctor says, I've got really bad news for you or for your friend or something, but in those simpler moments where there's just this sense of, here I am again doing that. And how serious do we have to take ourselves? Can we Can we love even that place? The practice of being around Maharaji was learning to accept that he saw me as whole and perfect, just the way I am with all of my neurosis. And can I begin to feel that myself? Can I realize that I still have this personality, that I get irritated with people? At times I'm distracted. My energy gets out of harmony in certain ways. And that in no way does that ever disconnect me from who I am or from who Maharaji or from who God is. It can't. That even that is that, right? Okay.
Wow. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the great question and for all your support.